I was sitting in a quiet municipal office in Tokyo, watching a young couple finalize their marriage registration. It was a scene of mundane efficiency, the rhythmic thud of red ink stamps, the polite bowing, the hushed rustle of paper. But there is a specific moment in this ritual that feels almost like an erasure. The bride signs a document, and with a single stroke of a pen, her birth name, her entire legal identity up to that point, simply ceases to exist. To most observers, this is just tradition or a gesture of family unity. Even the couple seem to treat it as a bureaucratic hurdle. But if you ask the conservative elite in the Japanese Diet why this practice is mandatory, why Japan remains the only developed nation on earth to legally forbid separate surnames, the justifications quickly veer away from modern logic. They speak of protecting the home, yet their stance feels strangely rigid, almost desperate. What's truly unsettling is the logic hidden beneath the surface. You see, there is one person in Japan who has no surname at all, the emperor. In the eyes of the ultra-conservatives who quietly steer the country's power, this isn't a historical quirk, it's a theological boundary. To them, a surname isn't something you're born with. It's a gift bestowed by the sovereign to his subjects. In their minds, the emperor is the supreme administrator of names, the ultimate patriarch of a divine hierarchy. When I first heard this theory, it sounded like an exaggeration, a piece of radical political theater. But then you look at the fervor with which the ruling class blocks even the most popular calls for change. You realize that for those in power, a woman keeping her own name isn't just a legal preference, it's an act of disrespect against a hidden state religion. It's a crack in the foundation of what some call a cultocratic theocracy. Why is a modern high-tech democracy so terrified of a maiden name? The answer suggests that Japan isn't quite the secular society it pretends to be.
Yeah, it really is a profound contradiction when you stop and think about it.
It is. I mean, you walk through Tokyo and you're basically surrounded by the trappings of the future, right?
Exactly. You've got autonomous delivery robots, bullet trains. It's a society that seems to have completely maximized efficiency.
But then you peel back that layer, you look at the paper trail that actually defines a citizen's life, and you find something incredibly ancient just ticking away underneath it all.
Right, and that ancient mechanism is what we're really looking at today. We are talking about the IE, the household system, and the Koseki, which is this family registry.
We are unpacking the hidden architecture of the Japanese family. We want to understand why a single piece of paper in a local municipal office carries the weight of a state religion.
And, why this system creates a unique crisis of identity, what we call the kanji trap, especially in our modern digital age.
Right. Because to understand that moment of erasure I saw in the municipal office, we really have to look at the socio-legal evolution of Japan's family system.
We have to investigate how that tradition impacts contemporary registration policies today. It offers some fascinating comparative insights for how East Asian nations in general navigate this tension between tradition and modernity in their legal frameworks.
So let's start with what we can call the container, the mechanism that actually demands this erasure.
That would be the Koseki.
Now, for anyone listening who is used to Western legal systems, you generally have a birth certificate. You are born, the state records your existence, and boom, you are an individual entity in the eyes of the law.
Exactly. In the US or Europe, the primary unit of citizenship is the individual. You have a direct one-to-one relationship with the state. But in Japan, the Koseki changes that entire geometry. Well, Japan does not register citizens as individuals. It registers them as members of a ko, which translates to a household unit.
So legally, I wouldn't just be John Smith. I'd be John Smith, registered member of the Smith household.
It goes even deeper than just the label.
Yeah.
There's a legal concept here that scholars refer to as jus Koseki.
Okay, I know jus sanguinis, the right of blood, where you inherit citizenship from your parents, and just solely the right of the soil, being born in a country.
Right. And Japan formally uses jus sanguinis, but in practice, there is this shadow principle of jus Koseki. It essentially means your citizenship, your actual capacity to exercise your rights as a Japanese national, is completely mediated through your entry into this household registry.
That sounds like a minor technicality, but let's play that out. If your rights are tied to a family registry, what happens if you aren't in one?
Legally speaking, you are treated as if you are outside the nation.
Wow.
Yeah. There is a specific term for it, mukoseki. It means people without a registry. And this happens far more often than you might think, usually because of really strict, archaic divorce laws.
Give me an example of how someone ends up mukoseki.
Well, say a woman goes through a difficult divorce. If she remarries and has a child within a certain window of time after that divorce, Japanese law automatically presumes the child belongs to the ex-husband.
Even if biologically it's impossible.
Even then, the registry demands it. So to protect the child from being legally tied to an abusive ex-husband, for instance, the mother might just choose not to register the birth at all.
But then that child becomes a ghost.
A total legal ghost. They exist physically, obviously. They grow up, they have lives. But without that specific entry in the Koseki, they cannot get a passport. They often face massive hurdles just attending public school.
They can't vote, I assume.
They cannot vote. They can't legally get married because the state doesn't have a mechanism to see an individual. You only have a mechanism to see a household. If you aren't in a box, you simply aren't on the shelf.
Terrifying. It prioritizes the integrity of a database over a human life. And inside this registry box, it's not just a flat list of names either, is it?
Oh, it is a highly rigid, vertical structure. Every single Koseki has a hitchhik.
The first registrant.
Exactly. This is the person whose surname indexes the entire family file. If you go to City Hall to pull your records, you have to look them up under the hitchhik's name.
And legally, under current law, this could be either the husband or the wife. Right.
Legally, yes. You check a box when you get married. But practically speaking, it is overwhelmingly male. We're talking 96 to 98% of all households have the husband as the hitchusha.
And this is where we see the ghost of the old I system, the traditional patriarchal household. The hitchusha is basically the modern bureaucratic placeholder for the patriarch.
And this ties into what we should call a generated tradition. The conservative elite really lean into the idea that this is some ancient, unbroken Japanese tradition.
Right. People hear traditional Japanese family and they instantly picture the samurai era stretching back thousands of years.
But it's a myth, or at least a massive historical distortion. The IE system, as a nationwide standard applied to every single Japanese person, is actually a Meiji-era invention.
So we're talking late 19th century here.
Specifically, the Civil Code of 1898.
Before 1898, your average rice farmer or merchant didn't live under this strict patriarchal code.
No, commoners had much more fluid family structures. Women often kept their birth names, or names just weren't that central to the legal structure of daily life. Adoption was incredibly common just to keep local businesses running, regardless of bloodline.
So what did the Meiji government actually do?
They took the samurai family model, which was very rigid, heavily patriarchal, totally focused on the eldest son inheriting absolutely everything, and they essentially legislated that every farmer, merchant, and fisherman must now structure their family like a samurai.
They completely gentrified the family structure of the entire country.
They militarized it, really. It wasn't about giving peasants prestige. It was entirely about state control. The logic was simple. If the father is completely responsible for the family and the father answers directly to the state, then the state effectively controls everyone through a very clear chain of command.
This is where that famous phrase comes in, right? Risai Kenbo.
Good wife, wise mother.
It sounds so nurturing on the surface.
It sounds nurturing, but it was a highly political ideology. The core idea wasn't just that women should be loving caregivers. It was that by being a good mother, you were functioning as an agent of the state.
You were raising future soldiers and workers.
You were raising imperial subjects. The physical home became the primary training ground for the empire, and the Koseki registry was basically the state's attendance sheet.
Japan loses World War II. The Americans arrive. The occupation happens from 1945 to 1952, and they rewrite the Japanese constitution. The narrative is that they democratized the country. Didn't they look at this feudal family system and dismantle it?
They did, on paper.
Yeah.
And this is where we get into what we can call the shell game. The 1947 Constitution did legally abolish the IE as a formal institution. Article 24 is actually very clear about it.
It says marriage is based on the mutual consent of both sexes, right?
Yes. Mutual consent, individual dignity, and the essential equality of the sexes.
So the IE system was dead.
The IE was legally dead, yes. But the Koseki, the registry itself, remained intact. And the conservative elite, who managed to retain a huge amount of administrative power after the war, basically re-articulated those old values.
They just moved the goalposts.
They shifted the venue. They couldn't enforce the IE by law in the farming villages anymore, so the IE values migrated into the corporate world.
The birth of the enterprise society.
Exactly. The idea of the company as family. Think about the classic image of the Japanese salaryman and the professional housewife during the high economic growth era of the 60s, 70s, and 80s.
The husband dedicates his entire existence to the corporation.
The corporation becomes his new IE. He gives it total loyalty, absolute self-sacrifice, just like a samurai pledging his life to his lord.
And the wife.
The wife manages the domestic IE. She ensures the corporate warrior is fed, rested, and the children are rigorously educated to enter the system. The structure remained completely hierarchical, collectivist, and deeply gendered.
So they essentially just swapped the feudal lord for a CEO.
And the Koseki kept the score the whole time. Which brings us to a really powerful social concept in Japan called seiken.
The public gaze?
Yes. People are absolutely terrified of what their Koseki looks like to the seiken. It is not just a private administrative document locked in a filing cabinet. It is your resume of respectability.
Right, because if you get divorced, there's a literal mark on your registry.
The dreaded X on the Koseki. It creates an immediate social stigma.
Yeah.
Or if you have a child out of wedlock, the registry forces that difference to be permanently legible to anyone who needs to see it.
And people need to see it for important life events.
All the time. It influences marriage prospects because families will hire investigators to check a potential spouse's Koseki. It influences employment background checks. So people fiercely curate their family registers to look standard and clean to the surrounding society.
It's social pressure codified into bureaucratic ink.
Exactly. It forces you to conform to the state's ideal family unit because the paperwork itself will punish you for the rest of your life if you don't.
And that punishment brings us directly to the label itself, the name, because the Koseki mandates a single surname for a couple to form that recognized unit. It forces a very difficult choice.
A choice that leads to massive real-world complications.
I want to explore the intricate relationship between Japanese surname phonetics, this concept of the kanji trap, and the cultural necessity of business cards for identity verification. There are real lessons here for digital identity management.
It's a huge issue. We often look at name changes in the West as just an administrative headache, going to the DMV, updating your bank cards. But in Japan, because of the writing system, changing your name is basically an ontological crisis.
I was reading about a marketing executive in Tokyo named Kenji and the crisis that hit his wife, Eri, after they got married. Eri is a renowned designer. Her entire professional brand was built on her birth name.
And in Japanese, her name isn't just a collection of phonetic sounds. It's a specific combination of kanji characters.
Right. Her kanji specifically suggested graceful forest. It was her identity. But when they married, the law gave them absolutely no choice. To be registered as a family, they had to share a name. Eri took Kenji's surname.
Which is what happens in the vast majority of cases.
But in the professional world, handing out a business card with her new legal name felt like a forgery to her. Her clients were confused. Her digital identity, which is obviously tied to legal government databases, was completely shattered. She literally had to carry two sets of business cards, a legal one for the government and a real one for her soul.
That dual identity reality is so common for professional women in Japan today. And to understand why it's so devastating, we have to look at the history of Japanese surnames, going back to 1875.
The Great Surname Rot.
Right. Before 1875, commoners, which was the vast majority of the population, did not have surnames at all.
They were just known by their given names or trades.
Basically, Ichiro from the lower village, or Hana the Weaver. But the modernizing Meiji government needed to tax people effectively, and they needed to draft them into a national army. To do that, you have to track them. And to track them, everyone needs a surname.
So the government issues the family name compulsory order.
Yes. They essentially sent bureaucrats out who said, you need to pick a family name, and you need to do it by next week. Imagine being a farmer who has never needed a last name, and suddenly the state demands one.
You literally look around you for inspiration.
Exactly what happened. I live in the middle of a rice field. Okay, your name is now Tanaka Middlefield. I live under that big pine tree, Matsushita Pine Under. I live near the upper part of the river, Kawakami River Upper.
Which perfectly explains why there are so many geography and nature-based names in Japan.
And it explains the sheer volume of them. Because hundreds of thousands of people were improvising simultaneously, Japan generated over 100,000 unique surnames almost overnight.
Especially when you contrast it with other East Asian countries. In China, you have this incredibly stable, ancient system of surnames that has anchored family lineages for millennia. It's highly organized and deeply rooted. But Japan in 1875 was just scrambling.
Right. In Korea as well, a huge percentage of the population shares just a few names, like Kim, Lee, or Park. But in Japan, the diversity is massive because of this sudden, completely improvised adoption.
Catch. The names are written in kanji characters, and those characters do not always tell you how to actually pronounce the name. This is the kanji trap.
It is the trap. In English, if I see the name Smith written on a piece of paper, I know exactly how to say it. But kanji are logograms. They represent meaning first, not just sound. And when it comes to names, the standard rules of pronunciation just go completely out the window.
Let's talk about Ninori readings.
Ninori are special readings of kanji characters that are used almost exclusively in names. And they are not strictly standardized. A character that means light could be pronounced as Hikaru, Akira, Turu, Ku purely based on the preference of the parents who chose it.
So you can look at a name, know exactly what it means, but have no idea how to address the person out loud.
And then you add the phenomenon of rendaku to the mix.
Sequential voicing.
Yes. It's a phonetic rule where consonant sounds change when words are combined. So if you combine the kanji for naka and ta, does it become nakata? Or does the T voice into a D and become dakata?
Depends.
It totally depends. It depends on the region, family preference, or just historical accident. There are linguistic studies on Japanese surnames showing that it is literally impossible to guess the pronunciation of many names with 100% accuracy just by looking at the characters.
You don't know the user manual for their name.
You lack the user manual. And this is why the meishi, the physical business card, is not just a polite corporate formality in Japan.
It's a survival tool.
It is a vital decoding tool. A meishi almost always includes furigana tiny phonetic script written above the kanji that explicitly tells you how to pronounce the name. Without that card, you are flying blind in a highly formal society where mispronouncing a name is a massive faux pas.
The card decodes the trap, and it places you in the social hierarchy. Usually lists the company first, then your title, then your name. It verifies exactly who you are and where you stand.
So going back to Eri, the designer, when she lost her legal right to her birth name, she didn't just change a few letters on a passport. She lost her user manual. She lost the verified, state-backed identity that she has spent her entire adult life building.
And as we said, in a society that relies heavily on digital verification for everything from banking to contracts, having your professional alias not match your legal ID causes huge systemic friction.
If it causes so much economic friction, if the business sector is complaining about it, if it hurts women's careers, why does the state insist on this single surname rule so stubbornly?
Which brings us to the ideology, the deep historical and ideological roots of this system. We are examining how traditional state ideologies continue to shape contemporary social policies and, frankly, block modern reforms.
To understand the resistance, you really have to look at the theology behind it.
I recently read a transcript of an interview with an elderly calligrapher living in Nara. He's a very traditional man. And he firmly believes that the emperor is the ultimate source of all Japanese identities.
That perspective is incredibly startling to a modern secular ear.
He explained that the reason the emperor has no surname is because he is the sun. And the sun does not need a label. A surname is a label you use to distinguish yourself from others in a group. The emperor is above the group.
And in his view, surnames are therefore bestowed by the throne down to the people.
Exactly. He called the movement for separate surnames a sacrilegious revolution. He argued that if individuals can simply choose their own names, they're effectively claiming they are their own gods.
They are claiming independence from the historical and divine hierarchy that flows directly from the emperor down to the male head of each household.
He genuinely believes that a woman insisting on keeping her maiden name is not seeking gender equality. She is actively breaking a link in a chain that stretches back to the gods. She is threatening the kokutai.
The kokutai, the national body of Japan. This is the absolute core of the Tenetki's logic, the emperor cult ideology.
It's a deeply right-wing traditionalist stance. To hear that a name is a gift from the sovereign that you aren't allowed to change feels incredibly restrictive to me, someone who values individual liberty.
But you have to understand the sheer terror behind his words. The conservative elite truly fear that if you pull on this one single thread of surname unity, the entire tapestry of Japanese tradition might unravel.
They fear the akaseakume.
The dynasty-changing revolution, yes, because it challenges the vertical flow of authority.
Let's unpack the Iksoku Koka, the family state theory. This was formalized by scholars like Hozumi Yatsuka in the Meiji-era, right?
Yes. Hozumi Yatsuka was a highly influential constitutional scholar. He argued that the Japanese nation is not a collection of independent individuals bound by a social contract. He argued the nation is one giant organic family.
With the emperor acting as the ultimate father figure.
Right. So if the nation is one giant family, then every individual household, every IE, is a miniature fractal of the state. The father of the household is a mini emperor.
This completely merges the concepts of loyalty to the state and filial piety to the family.
That fusion is called chukas. In older, broader Confucian traditions, loyalty to the sovereign and piety to your father were sometimes separate and could even conflict. The Meiji ideologues fused them together seamlessly. Being an obedient child and a submissive wife became exactly the same thing as being a loyal subject to the emperor.
So if a modern woman says, I want to keep my surname for my career, she thinks she's just making a practical professional choice.
But the conservative elite here, I am rebelling against the mini-emperor of my household, which means I am rebelling against the actual emperor, which means I am destroying the state.
It's a cultocratic theocracy hiding in plain sight within a secular democracy.
And it completely explains why they refuse to budge, even when the vast majority of the public and even the major business federations are demanding reform. You cannot compromise on sacred theology just because it's bad for the economy.
We've got three distinct layers operating simultaneously here to trap individuals, specifically women, in this system.
Layer one is the legal tool. That's the Koseki. It forces the population into household units and legally erases the individual.
Layer two is the social label, the surname, and the Meiji business card. It makes that forced unit highly visible and socially verifiable. You cannot escape the label without losing your social standing.
And layer three is the religious core, the emperor system and the family state ideology. This provides the ultimate, unquestionable justification for why that unit can never be broken.
Which leaves Japan with this extreme Galapagos syndrome of family law. They are completely isolated globally on this specific issue.
They're the only developed nation clinging to this. And it creates a massive clash between the individual dignity promised by the post-war Constitution and the family unity demanded by the remnants of the 1898 Civil Code.
We see politicians on television constantly talking about women's empowerment, forming committees to discuss surname reform.
But it's a completely virtual discussion. They pretend to discuss reform to appease the West or to placate modern voters. But the hidden religion operating backstage ensures that the law never actually changes.
Because changing the law requires admitting that the family state is just a political fiction.
And that brings us right back to the erasure you witnessed in the municipal office. When that bride signs away her name, it's not just a paperwork update. It is a theological assertion by the state that she is secondary to the preservation of the II lineage.
She isn't forming an equal partnership. She is being transferred from her father's registry to her husband's registry.
It's a harsh paradox. You have this high-tech, futuristic society that is fundamentally running on 19th century feudal software. We always tend to think of modernization as this straight, inevitable line toward Western individualism.
But the story of the Japanese surname proves that modernity can actually be engineered to protect feudalism.
Exactly. The enterprise society didn't replace the samurai family structure, it just industrialized it.
The next time you exchange a business card or sign a mundane government document, remember the invisible weight of history standing behind that name. In Japan, that weight isn't just family pride. It is the entire kokutai, the national body itself. The most radical act in a cultocratic democracy is simply wanting to be called by your own name.